Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Cenk Uygur of TYT, The Young Turks, has had an interesting week this week. He interviewed Graham Platner, candidate for Senate in Maine, who recently had a controversy over a tattoo, Nazi symbol tattoo that he got when he was in the military. This is a progressive left-wing candidate, criticizes the Democrats' enabling of a genocide, runs on Medicare for all, and among other suspicions about him, this tattoo thing has thrown a lot of questions up about who this guy is and where he comes from, although it seems like people in Maine still support him a lot. And so he still has momentum in his campaign. And I'll get into my thoughts about it later because it was more complicated than just talking about his tattoo. The tattoo is only one thing that I find suspicious about the guy, but I also think that if people in Maine are still supporting him, it's probably better for him to win the primary than any of his opponents as of now, unless somebody else gets in the race. So let me play this interview. Cenk kind of softballs this interview, asks him about some of these controversies, does not get into the parts that I think are genuinely interesting and a little suspicious, which has more to do with his military background. But this is Cenk asking Graham Platner about his controversies.
So, people of course talk about your Nazi tattoo, so-called Nazi tattoo. But in the Reddit comments, you said something about communism. So I was just wondering, are you a Nazi or a communist?
Yeah, the political trajectory that my opponents have put me through has been quite, there's a lot of whiplash there. Consistency does not seem to be their strong suit on this front. I am neither a Nazi or a communist. I have never been, in fact, either one. I have been a dedicated anti-fascist since I was a kid. I mean, I grew up listening to Dead Kennedys and the Dropkick Murphys and have had a distinct hatred of Nazis my entire life, which makes all of these attacks, frankly, all the more insane. I'm also not a communist, although on the internet, when I was getting in arguments with people, I would sometimes refer to myself as that, but clearly in jest, if anybody read them instead of just jumping onto them. I'm neither. I'm a United States Marine, and I also think people should have health care. That tends to be where I fall.
Graham, the most legitimate question, and it comes from our audience as well, is, yes, but how do we know this brother isn't gonna pull a Fetterman on us? And that's a good question, and it's really hard to answer.
As somebody who has been very, very, very cynical about politics for quite some time, if I was looking at myself, I would have the same question. My answer is, one, I very much, the policies that I am pushing are very, very clear, and I'm not going to be walking them back. I also think that my sort of journey through this life, which everybody now can essentially read chronologically on Reddit posts, it's brought me to a point where, I am deeply, deeply frustrated and disillusioned with the American political system. I am taking this on because there feels like a moment in American history, certainly here in the state of Maine right now, where we have the ability to kind of rebuild power at the local level, rebuild power on the ground level. People are angry and they are frustrated and they are looking to get into the fight. And we have a party that has failed to give them answers, has failed to give them mechanisms to get involved. That is what we're trying to do with this. I'm never going to walk back my criticism of the Democratic Party for supporting a genocide in Gaza. I am never going to walk back Medicare for all. I am never going to be walking back the need for us as a party not to give ground on progressive issues, but to focus on finding common ground around material issues with other working people.
It's funny how Cenk is at the beginning there, like, yeah, so your Nazi tattoo. I mean, your supposedly Nazi tattoo. I thought that was pretty funny. So TYT and Cenk are kind of on the same wavelength as Majority Report about this, that it doesn't make sense to tear Platner's campaign down over this controversy. They've traded shots with each other. For some reason, Anna Kasparian like really went hard against Majority Report because Majority Report was continuing to support Platner, even though TYT also continues to support Platner. So they agree, but for some reason they both took it as an opportunity to just shit on Majority Report for no reason. They're both quite unhinged at this point. But anyway, this interview I think reflects the fact that Cenk doesn't really have any interest in tearing into Platner over this. And I think when it comes to the tattoo, it's mostly true that it's kind of this aesthetic thing. There's margin for error in there about why he got this tattoo, what it means. You know, a lot of people saying, I wouldn't recognize this, and I know a lot of Nazi symbols. That's subjective. But what I've found more suspicious about Graham Platner, and even before the tattoo thing came out, the number one red flags for me were the combination of his working with the military and with private military contractors. And he did that for a lot of his life. And he said he was, involved in very violent conflict in Afghanistan and Iraq. And not only is that a little bit of a hard pill to swallow in itself, I know that in, American candidates, we instinctually, we just automatically support veteran candidates. But, like he says in his own words, this is a guy who was really fighting. And to me, it's the combination of that and the fact that he went into private aspects of this fighting later in his career, and also surveillance and reconnaissance elements of warfare in the Middle East on behalf of the United States. He mentioned that in the Pod Save interview that he did. And plus, he worked for a company that was formerly BlackRock. It became, I believe, Constellus is the name of it now. Sort of an umbrella company for that type of private military surveillance type of contracting. So his experience doing, things like reconnaissance and surveillance, presumably with this doctrine of counterinsurgency and counterintelligence in the Middle East, is the thing that makes me look at him and say, that's a pretty wide base of knowledge that you have in something that has historically on the record been used to tear down leftist movements. That doesn't mean that he's some kind of insidious plant, but it certainly means that I have a lot of questions about that. And I feel like should want to ask those questions. And the obvious critique of Cenk is, his allying himself with people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and politicians supposedly across this bipartisan line of populism, we're in favor of right-wing populists too. And by defining the platform as populist, they've made it pretty vague, TYT has. And seems like they're trying to gather people into their coalition on pretty tenuous grounds. So I want to be clear about something, that I don't think Graham Platner fits into that category when it comes to TYT specifically. I wouldn't lump that in with courting Marjorie Taylor Greene and politicians like that, because Graham Platner's platform that he's running on is very consistently left populist in a way that would be anti-establishment and transformative in America. So that is an important operative thing to note about Graham Platner. And he says here in response to the question of, are you going to be another John Fetterman, that his policies are straightforward and he won't be walking them back. So we'll see what happens. I'm kind of the opinion at this point, despite the fact that he sets off certain alarms for me, just let it play out. Let the race play out, because people of Maine are ultimately going to decide. I'm not going to dedicate myself to doing negative coverage of him unless things continue to seem very suspicious about him. And to me, honestly, I kind of am a little prejudiced. He just has cop face to me. He has cop voice. He doesn't, now that I can't unlearn these things about him. It's hard not to sort of see him in that light, and that's just my own personal bias. We'll see where his campaign is able to go from here. Because the other thing important to note about it is that Janet Mills is his opposition. It's not like Janet Mills would be better or like is some kind of, something that the establishment, the deep state wants to run against. You know what I mean? So that makes it a very narrow argument that he's some kind of operative that's meant to like infiltrate the left-wing populist movement. I firmly believe that could be true. That because it's a burgeoning movement that is specifically aimed at taking up space in US Congress, it makes sense to activate somebody for the purpose of trying to grab one of those roles, grab a seat in a gettable district so that you have somebody on the inside of that movement. That's not inconceivable. But the fact that he's running against Janet Mills and Susan Collins, to me, it's probably a better bet that he get in office than one of them. And if there's somebody else who runs in that race who doesn't have all this sort of weird vibes about him, then I'd be happy to support that person instead. As of right now, Maine is probably better off with Graham Platner. But anyway, back to Cenk. So he also went on Piers Morgan's show. He's gone on this regularly. Mostly not worth covering. It's just arguing back and forth. I wouldn't have, except he was arguing with Katie Miller here, Stephen Miller's wife, and she kind of threatens to deport him in mid-argument. And he doesn't really seem to notice because in this conversation, he's doing what him and Anna have both been doing when confronted with bloodthirsty Zionists and just like truly shouting them down. And it's the main value that I think they're bringing to the public conversation at the moment, the TYT folks, is they're being pretty sharp-toothed on the issue of Israel and going against Zionists publicly. And I think that it's probably the only way to debate people like that. So let me show you a clip here.
Why is it that every time someone wants to criticize Mamdani, it immediately comes back to the Jews and the anti-Israel movement instead of actually talking about his viewpoints, which is that he
Nobody
wants to
said
make
Jews. You just said it. You always do that. We say Israel, you say Jews. We say Israel is a government. Please don't make it about Jewish Americans. And you come back with, you have to make it about Jewish Americans. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?
Is Israel a Jewish state? Yes or no?
First of all, okay, so Saudi Arabia is a Muslim state, and you can criticize it all day long, all day long. There's no special protection.
Because what you're doing is you're decoding language to attack American
Jewish state or
and
a
to
Muslim
say that
state.
we should not be here and we should not be in existence, and that you would be happy for other people like Mamdani to use it.
I want Israel to be safe.
Nothing of the sort.
Nonsense, you're totally lying. It's very normal for a Miller to be completely and utterly lying. That's not true. We want Israel to be a safe haven for Jews. 1967 borders, but you guys say no, more Palestinian land. Take Gaza, take the West Bank, take southern Lebanon. Your greed knows no bounds. And by the way, you and your husband are supposed to be working for America, not for Israel. I think you're betraying this country.
All right, Cenk. Katie.
No, Piers, quite frankly, I'm really sick and tired of this racist, bigoted rhetoric that comes from people like you against my husband, against my family, and my children. I am raising Jewish children in this country in which you feel
into this. What a weirdo.
Piers, I'm going to be done with this if you're going to allow racist and bigoted attacks against one of your commentators just for the sake that he will not
hang on.
speaking.
Casey, to be clear, Casey, to be clear,
he inserted a line that says the Miller's lie. Is that not coded language for therefore we are Jewish? Come on, Piers, where are you? Where are you standing?
God, you're so
Katie,
pathetic.
if I like I say, you may not like the scale of response.
They murdered children because one of their SS soldiers was killed. And it wasn't even by Hamas. Are you kidding me, Piers? So they're occupying 53% of Gaza right now. So shouldn't they get the hell out of Gaza? So one of their SS soldiers gets killed, and we're supposed to shed a tear for the occupiers? In reality, they murdered 46 children. They murdered 46 children today, Piers. I can't stand the terrorism of Israel.
Yeah, but you know what, Cenk? When you call the IDF SS soldiers and you compare them directly to the Nazis, and you know they're Jewish, I'm not Jewish, and I find that horrible.
So no. Israel does. Hold on. Let me explain. So Israel does not get a pass on committing another genocide because Jewish people suffered the Holocaust. What happened in the Holocaust was
you don't get a pass for calling
it was
them
horrible. Hold on. So what happened in the Holocaust and all the pogroms were disgusting. That doesn't mean that Israel, pretending to represent Jews across the world, gets to commit another genocide upon a totally innocent people and collective punishment and murdering children over and over again and go, I get to do it. I get to do a genocide. You don't get to do a genocide. There is no jail-free country.
You know what I get to do? All right, Cenk. What I get to do is invite every member of the panel to speak fairly and openly. And my question was directed to Katie. I mean, Katie, look, from my point of view,
you asked me about that.
Anyone.
And they are. They're committing genocide.
Please let Katie speak.
60% of the kids they killed have sniper shots to the head or chest. They're literal terrorists.
Let Katie Miller speak. Cenk, let Katie speak. Katie.
In the last segment with Rep. Randy Fine, what you said was he had said the word Muslim. He never once said the word Muslim. You immediately turn it to identity politics, which are more than identity politics.
He did say the word Muslim.
All right, so some really interesting things on display here. First of all, I mean, it is genuinely a good opportunity to speak some truth to power in a way that you don't usually get so satisfyingly, because she clearly wasn't prepared for this type of conversation. Pierce seems a little scared because obviously she's going to complain to Stephen Miller about this. He probably was hoping to get him on the show. Now, if anything, he has just pissed him off. And it's crazy because I've never seen her speak before. I didn't realize that she talks exactly like him. They have the same mannerisms, the same like pompous racism. It's like the exact same vibe. That's crazy. I didn't know that. So the thing about Cenk here is that he's put himself in an interesting position here because Pierce kind of throws him to the wolves in this segment, not just in this moment, but also he brings on Randy Fine, who has specifically called for Cenk Uygur, I don't know, some kind of terrorist or something like that, and he allows Cenk Uygur to confront that guy as well in this segment. But really, I mean, that dude is just a virulent racist, so same thing. It's an opportunity for him to confront power in a very direct way, more direct than most of us get. And it was even kind of an ambush on this Randy Fine guy. But at the same time, Pierce is kind of sanctioning such blatant bigotry here that it's hard to see how it's helpful. It reminds me of the Jubilee debate with Mehdi Hassan, where he's just getting this horribly racist venom over and over again, and then they're trying to make this intellectual argument to justify it, which is essentially laundering this racism to masses of people. And I get that we're long past the point of containment with that sort of thing, but it's hard to see how putting somebody in a position to just be threatened by, some sniveling racist, it's hard for me to see the value of that as like political debate content. So I respect that Cenk is willing to go into conversations like this, but it worries me to see the level of racism that people like this get away with. And like I said, Cenk doesn't even really seem to hear her when she says the thing about what she says is, you better check your citizenship papers to make sure everything's right, because you could be going the same way as Ilhan Omar next. And Cenk is just continuing to yell at her about Zionist hypocrisy. So that is great, honestly. It's a great moment. And I know that there's plenty of criticisms to be had about Cenk, and I'm not trying to be too soft on him. But I think anytime someone's citizenship is being threatened like this, especially in the course of advocating for Palestine against Israel, that's an important area of support. And I think it's going to become increasingly relevant because the people they're going to try to go after are the ones who are more controversial, the people who are going to lack favoritism in the media. So I don't know. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Cenk. I think there's more likely targets, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on. And I wouldn't discount the fact that she said this to him, and just blowing straight past her was absolutely the correct way to handle this conversation with Katie Miller. So anyway, just an update on what they're talking about here. They're talking about the ceasefire in Gaza, which was violated. It's really been violated several times throughout the days since it was initially signed. Israel obviously has a lot more leverage to violate this ceasefire. So if somebody who is an Israeli soldier gets killed, they respond and kill a bunch of civilians, including children. And that is what happened in this case. It looks like the ceasefire is going to hold up. Hamas is returning the remains that they had been promising to return. It's been difficult for them to recover some of these remains, although all of the living hostages have been returned at this point. So Israel is continuing to kill people and is also taking control of land in the Gaza Strip. So where this agreement is going to go, especially considering the constant lack of willingness to adhere to the ceasefires from Israel, we're not really sure yet. There's a reason Zionists are so in favor of this agreement, and I think for that reason, because it's going to continually be leveraged in a direction that is unfavorable to not only Hamas but the Palestinian people, I think that's likely to break the ceasefire at some point. And I do not see Trump getting in the way of that momentum of things going in that direction. So that would be my call on it, but hopefully it holds up. But the next steps of the process aren't exactly going to lead to, freedom in Palestine. So it's important to keep an eye on, and it's important to keep talking about, especially as they continue targeting people who are talking about that issue, because the conversation is going to be ongoing, and the actual outcome of what happens in Gaza and Palestine needs to continue to be central in the conversation as the mainstream media is going to move on from this narrative of a quote-unquote war, if they're able to. Pressure getting pressed, do you feel it now? What even happens next, I don't really know. Voice carries less, can you hear me now? Soon as I get blessed, time's running out. Pressure getting pressed. Pressure getting pressed. Feel the pressure getting pressed. Yeah. Pressure, do you feel it now? I'm just saying this.